Welcome to Sherlock Monthly, everyone. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we're going on a monthly biblioventure through the stories of Sherlock Holmes. Today's episode is The Adventure of Charles Augustus Milverton, and joining me for this episode are two co-hosts. Welcome back to Monica Schmidt. Hi, Monica.
Hey, Ed.
And first time co host, Rich Krisciunas. Hi, Rich.
Good to see you.
Very happy to have you with us. Um, as everyone knows, for 30 weeks in 2023-24, we deduced, deciphered, dissected Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes adventures in a kind of conversational annotation. You can see all those episodes on the Rosenbach's YouTube channel. Now we are continuing the Biblioventure in a monthly series. Every month, a distinguished Sherlockian or two joins me to discuss one of the stories in the order they were first published. And this is now episode 38. If you are watching live right now, thank you for watching. I would also ask you to please like and subscribe and have fun in the live chat, which I can see. Hello, everybody from Richmond and the Philly suburbs and Beaufort, North Carolina and Los Angeles and Delancey Place right next to the Rosenbach. Hi, Fred. St. Louis. So I enjoy the chat with yourselves, guys. I try to pay attention to it for questions and comments. And also, I would ask everyone if you would please consider making a donation to the Rosenbach or by becoming a member. You can do this on our website, rosenbach.org. Your support helps us create programs like this and care for our collections. It is very necessary these days for us to, be able to raise the money that we can raise to do these kinds of programs for you. Sherlock Monthly is also brought to you by the generous support of Lisa Washington. Thank you, Lisa. So let me give a full introduction to our co-host for today. You know her from Sherlock Mondays, Monica Schmidt, Ash BSI, president of the Young Stanfords of Iowa City. She's a member of multiple Sherlockian societies, Norwegian Explorers of Minnesota, Sons of the Copper Beaches here in Philadelphia, Speckled Band of Boston, Hounds of the Baskerville Sick of Chicago. Since 2013, Monica has been a staple in the Sherlockian lecture circuit, typically speaking on the subject of Sherlock Holmes and mental health, having written the definitive essay on Holmes's cocaine use in the canon. She has received the investiture of Julia Stoner from the Baker Street Irregulars in 2019 and the Church of St. Monica, I love that, from the Adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes in 2015. When not engaged in Sherlockian events or playing cricket. Still playing cricket?
Yes. I'm actually missing practice today. There was supposed to be a practice game. So as soon as I'm done with this podcast, I'm going to be changing my attire, getting in my gear, and then going up to Cedar Rapids and joining the match.
That's awesome. Well, Monica's also a licensed mental health counselor in private practice and a film critic. Welcome. Thanks so much, Monica, for
it's so glad. I'm so glad to be back. It's always an honor to hang out with you. And now I get to actually share the spotlight with one of my favorite Sherlockians as well, Rich. So
Rich Krisciunas is an attorney who has practiced criminal law for 50 years. He retired as chief of the trial division for the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, was an adjunct trial practice professor for 40 years at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. Rich attended his first Sherlockian meeting in 1978 with the Amateur Mendicant Society of Detroit. He's a member of the Adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes and a dozen other scions, including the Ribston Pippins and Greek Interpreters of East Lansing. Rich is a regular presenter, and I love this, of Sherlockian Law 101 at the Crew of the Bark Lone Star meetings, which I attend online, and I love those, Rich. He was awarded the Derek Murdoch Award for Best Article in Canadian Holmes 2021 for The Real Killer of Charles Augustus Milverton. We can ask you about that today. He has made Sherlockian presentations at many conferences, been published in the Baker Street Journal, Sherlock Holmes Review, Watsonian, and all. He's an officer at Legion of Zoom, copy editor of the Baker Street Journal, and the treasure hunt master for the John H. Watson Society's annual treasure hunt. Rich, I'm so happy to finally get you on the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And we definitely will get into the real killer of Charles Augustus Milverton today. I can't wait to do that. First, Monica, let me bounce back to you. What's new since we've last seen you on this show?
It's been about a year, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what has transpired in a year? Um, we'll just say for me, I think it's mostly been Sherlockian book sales because I represent for BSI Press. So I'm usually running a vendor table at various Sherlockian events and selling all of these wonderful tomes behind me. Additionally, I am the mistress of, oh yes, and behind Rich, and I am the mistress of merch for the Baker Street Irregulars as well. So I get to handle all the sales of the neckties, bow ties, cummerbunds, pocket squares, silk scarves, basically the swag. So I get to make people happy. And so I've spent a lot of time in the last year doing that. Beyond that, it's basically been trying to help keep the existential dread at bay. By engaging in various Sherlockian events as well as focusing on the therapy practice. I've also started doing lectures, within the realm of social work and mental health. Actually, and most of my lectures dealing with mental health have been for a Sherlockian audience, but now I'm expanding to actual clinical audience and teaching clinical audiences about how I use Sherlock Holmes for psychoeducation. So I'm very excited about that.
Interesting. That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Well, it's basically just taking the same concepts and presenting kind of presenting some of the background information. Sherlockians know the stories inside and out, but they don't know the clinical, kind of the clinical perspectives. The clinicians that I'm presenting to know the clinical perspectives, but they don't know the Sherlock Holmes stories. So, for presenting for Sherlockians, I have to teach them the clinical. For presenting for the clinicians, I have to teach them the Sherlockiana. And for me, in all honesty, that's actually a lot more fun. I enjoy psychoeducation, but it's way more fun to teach the muggles, so to speak, the normals, about what the heck this is that we do. And many of them are intrigued, possibly a little horrified, but mostly intrigued by this hobby, or as I refer to it, this lifestyle of ours.
Yes. So it is certainly yes,
Expansive.
yes. It can be all consuming.
Oh yes, eat, breathe, and sleep.
Well, thank you for coming back. Rich, since this is your first time on the show, we've had Monica's first introduction to Sherlock story back in, Sherlock Mondays in the very beginning. Rich, what was your introduction to the world of Sherlock?
So I lived in Detroit, and right across the border is Windsor, Canada, and there was a television show, uh, Sunday Showtime, and they showed Sherlock Holmes movies, the Basil Rathbones.
Basil's, yeah.
So that's what first intrigued me. And then, and I don't think I really read the stories that much. I was always into baseball books. And then, but I liked the Hound of the Baskervilles, and I have the poster. So when I went to work at the prosecutor's office, I brought that poster to my office, and I do arguments kind of like the way that Sherlock Holmes analyzes cases. And the guy came in, Bob Radnick, and he said, "Hey, you like Sherlock Holmes?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You should come to a meeting of the Amateur Mendicant Society." And I said, "Okay." So I started attending meetings, and then my wife got me the annotated. Uh, Baron Gould. So I started reading everything. And then, my daughter was born, and I coached soccer, coached basketball. I didn't have time. And then when she went away, then I got back into Sherlock Holmes. And, the rest is history. I checked to see if there was an Amateur Mendicant Society meeting, if they were still meeting, and I attended. And then Regina Stinson from the Ripston Pippins said, "Well, we meet every other month." So I attended that. I went to the Dayton conference, Holmes, Doyle, and Friends, and I watched the presentations. And Mike McSwiggan made me laugh, and Bob Katz did a presentation that showed that John Watson actually was in the United States during the Civil War and was at Gettysburg. And it was like an eye-opening experience where I said,
That
I
had to have been 2019
Yeah.
then, I
yeah,
think.
Yeah, I've heard
It
pre-COVID,
was
that.
20,
Yeah.
yeah, 2019, I think.
yeah, pre-COVID. And I
Yeah.
thought, what? This is great stuff. So I started looking at the stories and looking at it as, well, what if I was a defense attorney and I defended some of these people? So, I wrote articles, and I wrote a piece about who really killed
Mhm.
Sherlock Holmes, and tongue in cheek defended Baron Gruner, who is the most misunderstood man in the canon.
Oh, I was just gonna say we have some big
Yes.
disagreements on that one.
We're the most evil. So
Oh
one or the
man.
other.
Yeah. When we get to illustrious clients, you might have to have both Rich and I back on so we can argue. It will make for excellent
There we go.
The last 6 months, I've been working on the most misunderstood man in the canon, James Windibank.
Ooh.
Another one.
So, tongue in cheek,
Yeah.
Oh,
people.
oh man. Ugh.
That's a hard one, but I'm getting there. I'm real close to the product, end of the product.
But
So
is there really, would you really want to defend Charles Augustus Milverton? I mean, well, I shouldn't say want to, but
no, he's indefensible, but everybody deserves a defense under
yeah.
our system of justice. So, I've defended people that were really bad, did bad things. It doesn't mean that I approve the crimes that they committed. It's just that the government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt what they did with
Milverton
legitimate
would be
evidence.
really tough though, wouldn't it? I mean it's well, I don't know if it's any more tough than anything else though,
Yeah,
So
it's fun. It's fun. There are times I've come home to my wife and I came up with a defense for a defendant. And it was ridiculous. I laughed. I laughed so hard the first time I said it. And then I said it again, and then I said it again, and I said it again to try to get rid of the smile. And I made the argument to the jury, and the jury bought it. And I was like, who are these people? When the verdict came in, before the verdict came in, I told the defendant asked me, what should I do? I said, take all of the things out of your pocket and give them to your family because you're going to go to jail. And the jury came back not guilty. Oops.
wow.
Well,
Yeah.
you did your job. You did your job well.
I
All
felt like I
right.
was standing next to O.J. Simpson.
Who was not convicted.
Right.
Yeah. The Well, I'm so happy you joined us, Rich. We also have in the audience out there, I see Claire Danes has joined us from New Zealand, and Claire has kind of become the poet, the poet laureate of the show because she writes little poems for all the stories. And here is this month's, which she sent me on this story. How doth the smooth extortionist improve his study floor? Back arched like a contortionist, the carpet red with gore. How helplessly he seems to writhe, how faint his final breath, and leaves behind a world more blithe, the better for his death. And Claire also said a note that she'd like to state for the record that she does not condone murder in any way. I'm merely capturing Holmes's take on the case in verse. So yes, thank you. I have to tell you, I'm not sad when he gets it in the end either, Claire. So
Several people say he needed killing.
yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those times where, I think the world is far better off in his absence.
All righty. Well, you guys ready for this one? Let's just jump right into it. Published in March 26, 1904 in Collier's magazine, The Strand in April 1904. So, The Strand's coming out, probably released the very end of the month, maybe the last day of March. The Collier's probably a couple days before then. So, let's look at the covers. The Colliers, as we've been seeing now, is been illustrated by Frederick Dorr Steele, and these are just, and the cover, when there are covers, and it's almost every time that there's a Sherlock story in Collier's, they do a cover. Only a couple of them they don't do illustrations for, and here it is at the end of the story with the mysterious dark lady after the murder has happened, is what they've chosen, is what he's chosen to illustrate here with the letters on the floor. The curtain. Do they shout? No, they don't, because there are other illustrations of this final confrontation scene, and in some of them you see like Holmes or Watson peeking out from behind curtains, but not in this one. There's also a as the story begins, Collier's usually does this lovely illustration for or Dorr Steele does this illustration for the above the title, and here it's the spider with the letters in the web. I like this very much. And he certainly is a spider. We'll look at other pictures of Dorr Steele has done when we come to them in the story. And here's the Strand. Again, Sherlock is big news, and this is the top of the cover, Return of Sherlock Holmes. The other side, the memoirs of Sarah Bernhardt. The last couple months, it's been W.W. Jacobs has shared this space up here with Doyle's Holmes, and this time it's Sarah Bernhardt's memories. They must be quite juicy. And then the story. And then there's no picture in front of the story. As has been happening for a while, there was an illustration that begins, and then they go into the story, like as a kind of almost like a frontispiece, and that's not done for this one. But we'll get to more of the illustrations as we get into it. And the manuscript for this exists, and it is the cover of the manuscript, or the first page of the manuscript, reveals a different title for the story. And there it is. It was, Doyle wrote it all up and had a title, which he then changed. It was originally The Adventure of the Worst Man in London. And maybe as soon as he was done, yes, is the
which is the title of the BSI Press manuscript series book, The Worst Man in London,
which you have an essay in.
Yes, I do.
And
self-promotion, though it may be, but
then this crossed out. He put Charles Augustus Milverton. He decided that was a better title. I've heard various reasons for this. There was a popular play at the time called The Worst Woman in London, but I don't know. I think at the end of the day, the title works better. I'm not sure that Doyle was any more concerned than, what's a better sounding title. I think it's not a good title, The Worst Man in London. But
it's setting it up for, like, we'll just say anytime that you're using an absolute qualifier like the best, the worst.
Yeah.
It's basically setting it up more or less for failure, just because can it live up to it? Granted, I think if Rich thinks that Milverton is indefensible, then perhaps it works perfectly fine. But
what do you think Lestrade thought if he was still alive in April of 1904 when he read the story?
What do you think Lestrade thought? Oh, well, yeah, that's Watson never seems to have any concern over what Lestrade would think about stories that he wrote and how he's conveyed in them. He seems very concerned with protecting the reputations of people, but never the police.
Yeah, never the constabulary.
So he did change the title. Maybe it was just when he had sent it out to be typed that it was changed. But he did change it, and it begins There it is. It is years since the incidents of which I speak took place, and yet it is with diffidence that I allude to them. It would have been impossible to make the facts public before then. Now the principal person concerned is beyond the reach of human law, and with due suppression, the story may be told. So we get it as part of his intro, and this has happened several times in stories, right? It's this case happened years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I can finally reveal it. Um, uh, the consensus for the chronologist seems to be, I don't know, maybe 1899. There's some people still think it's earlier, but it seems that most of them seem to think it's later than that. Uh, and but who is beyond the reach of the as or I don't know if that's a question we should ask, at the end of the story, but
I think that's probably better suited for the end.
yeah. Because it winds up being uncertain. I think people think that is it the woman who committed the murder at the end of the story? Is it, I don't know, is it
That would
Sherlock?
be my theory.
Is it Sherlock who's retired now?
Well, or Sherlock who's dead because it's
Yeah,
beyond the reaches of the law. Retirement wouldn't keep him from being beyond the
that's
reaches.
true.
Or King Edward, who is now the king and had not been a king at the time.
Yeah, there's people who think that maybe that was the person involved in the blackmail. So,
Potentially, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I'll be
Um,
back in a minute. Oh, just
but
gotta put
Watson is deliberately concealing the date. So this whole story becomes such a problem, I think, for Sherlockians to figure out and to kind of place within this, real Sherlockian universe, and that because he's concealing, we never know what's concealed. Like it's winter. Is it then? So was it really spring? Because he doesn't want to give things away. This becomes a real troublesome thing, and I feel like most of the chronologies I read about the story and stories that try to place it in the real universe or whatever we want to call it, um, always have a moment or two. It's like, oh yes, well he was concealing. That's why that doesn't match up. So this winds up being a tricky one. They are out for their evening ramble. I like this. They have their evening rambles, which I guess is just walking around town on a cold, frosty winter's evening, maybe with a pipe.
Yep, little evening constitutional.
Yeah, more likely a cigar than a pipe. So people see that frequently. I've mentioned this before, frequently in movies and things portrayed, the gentleman walking around with pipes. That didn't really happen. They walked around with cigars, maybe, but definitely not a pipe. So pipe is a one you have
Yes,
where you can sit
and ponder.
So unlike today when I walk around all the time with my pipe.
You're the exception versus the rule.
Well, no, that's just the way it is now. We're allowed, but it's not. Where else am I going to smoke? Home or outside? Nowhere else.
Home, outside, or Ashton.
Yeah. But they return and there's a card on the table, and Holmes throws it down with an ejaculation of disgust. And it's from Charles Augustus Milverton, Appledore Towers, Hampstead, agent. And this is when Holmes says he's the worst man in London. What do you guys think of the opening of this story? I mean, to reveal the villain this quickly.
It's fantastic. I mean, it telegraphs everything, but I love the fact that Holmes, who usually doesn't speak, as kind of as I mentioned in absolute qualifiers, breaks out. He is the worst man in London. We'll just say, Moran, the second worst man in London, or the second most dangerous man in London. He does a good job of ranking people, but it basically shows that Holmes is accustomed to dealing with the worst of the worst of our society. And if Holmes labels this man the worst man in London, then, we're dealing with a genuinely evil, horrible, terrible human being, which
As a
makes for a great villain.
as a blackmailer, some people have suggested that the reason you never see Holmes talk about other people in that same manner,
Mhm.
and some people have suggested that as a blackmailer, he thinks that Milverton may have some information about Holmes. And that's why he talks about that. You gone to the zoo, you have that creeping, shrinking sensation as
Yeah.
you stand before the serpents, the slithery, gliding, venomous creatures with their
Mhm.
deadly eyes and wicked, flattened faces. That's
Yeah.
how Milverton impresses me. It's like, wow. He talks about 50 murderers that he's dealt with, and Milverton is worse than those 50.
Overton's worse. Yeah.
Got to be worse than Moriarty, worse than Colonel Moran, worse than a
Well,
lot of.
Moriarty was business. This is like in
I
many ways,
don't. Oh, isn't this business too?
but there's some pleasure that's in this. I mean, that's kind of the difference I'd say between Milverton and Gruner. Those are like the two that where there's like
We're not going to talk
personal.
about Gruner because we haven't done
Oh
that
yeah,
stuff.
we're not going to talk about Gruner, but we'll just say is that there are some villains within the in the context of the canon that take some very perverse pleasure at doing harm to others, and I think that's the difference between Milverton and a few other villains, as well as like the more classical kind of grouping that we have. That's what makes them bad is, or what makes them the worst is the personal pleasure.
So, who were the murderers before Milverton that Holmes would have dealt with? Grimsby Roylott, the woman who poisoned her three little children for insurance money, John
Mhm.
Turner, Blackjack of Ballarat, who had the robbery, killed five guards,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Holmes let him go.
Yep.
Cunningham, Reigate Squires, Josiah Amberley, who killed his wife in the chess playing doctor, Abe Slaney, the most dangerous crook in Chicago, Reuben Hayes, who killed the teacher, Herr Haydigger. Uh,
I love that you have this list off the top of your head, by the way, Rich. This is
yeah, Peter
amazing.
Carey, murdered
Yes,
the kid
Black Peter.
for the stock certificates. Sir George Burnwell, one of the most dangerous men in Europe. Jim Browner, who killed two people. Uh, you
Cut
know,
ears off and
But
sent
this,
them in the
but this is
mail.
yeah, but this is for funsies.
Wilson Kemp and Harold Latimer, who tortured and killed Cratides. Beddington, who killed the bank guard. James Calhoun, who killed three Openshaws. Uh, so there are some others that could be up to that same level, which points to the argument that perhaps he had a prior relationship with Milverton that didn't go well, and that's why he's much more upset.
I think one of the things maybe going on is that with because it seems odd, that he would has this long description of how horrible this blackmail is, and yet that's worse than these people who have murdered family members and all these other people. But he says just before then he says, and yet I can't get out of doing business with him. Indeed, he is here at my invitation. And perhaps it's the fact that all those murderers Holmes can just capture or get rid of, find out what they've done and deal with that situation. But with Milverton, he like I have to actually work with him to help him commit this blackmail because this is what Holmes has been hired to do. He has to make the offer. He's not doing this to catch him. This isn't an investigation into Milverton. He's been hired to deal with a bad guy in a business transaction. And for somebody like Holmes, who is far less concerned with legality than he is with justice, this must seem like the worst thing you could ask him to do, right? Uh, deal to like help abet
Hmm.
the blackmail is what he's been hired to do. And uh but Watson himself is even shocked. I had seldom heard my friend speak with such intensity of feeling. Um uh that this is, really surprising even to Watson, how difficult or how repulsed Sherlock is by this. His victims dare not hit back, Holmes says too. So, this is a kind of thing where, his victims are helpless. And in this story, it's women who would become victims here. And this is important for him. Although it would, in the 1890s especially, the victims of blackmailers were not women. The victims of blackmailers were homosexual men. And there was this, since the 1885 Criminal Amendment Act that makes the gross indecency between men a criminal action, up to 2 years imprisonment. There's practically an epidemic of blackmailing in these circles of men. And of course, Oscar Wilde winds up, going to prison for it. But many men at the time were prosecuted or were threatened with blackmail, fled to the continent because of it. And but I don't think Doyle wants any parts of that kind of story. I think that he's made the victims here women who for him, and especially the chivalrous Dr. Doyle, that's the kind of thing that would inspire him to help, not homosexual men, which is what was going on at the time, and everybody knew. So, there's also the Raffles story. Do you guys know the Raffles story?
This is the downside of being sometimes a little too focused of a Sherlockian, as I haven't Raffles stories. So,
well, Raffles, E.W. Horning.
Yes, Doyle's brother-in-law, right?
Yeah, he married Doyle's sister Connie. He wrote these stories about Raffles, who's a cracksman. Breaks safes and robs people, but he steals jewels from the rich, and he's a bad guy. And it's like he steals for a living, and he has an assistant who Bunny is his name, which might seem weird, but it's like a cricket term, I think, a bunny.
I'm unfamiliar, but I also play T20, so it's it'll just say different nomenclature between 1895 cricket and
Bunny's connected with cricket, yeah. And Raffles himself is like a famous cricket player in the stories. Well, Horning published these stories when Doyle had retired from Holmes. Like Holmes is retired like that 8 to 10 years when Holmes, the Reichenbach falls, and before the return. Horning starts writing these stories and even dedicates the first volume of them to Doyle. And there's one of the stories, and it's called Willful Murder, in which Raffles decides he's going to kill a moneylender fence because he ruins people's lives, and he also has info about Raffles, that Raffles is a thief and that he could blackmail him for it. But when he goes to kill him, somebody else has already killed him, and then Raffles helps, cover it up at the end of the story, Raffles and Bunny. And Doyle had said at one point, or written in the Memories and Adventures, I think I may claim that his famous character, Horning's famous character, Raffles, was a kind of inversion of Sherlock Holmes. I like Doyle playing the literary criticism here. Bunny playing Watson. He admits as much in his kindly dedication. I think there are a few finer examples of short story writing in our language than these, though I confess I think they are rather dangerous in their suggestion. I told him so before he put pen to paper, and the result has, I fear, borne me out. You must not make the criminal a hero, is what Doyle thought about the Raffles stories, that perhaps that wasn't, you shouldn't do that. And I just end all this by saying, like, I wonder if, especially with the parallels in those two stories, if this story isn't a kind of answer to Horning.
It could be. It could be, although I think Horning might have ushered in the entire genre of anti-hero, if you will.
Bunny is a peak hitter in cricket.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Max has said this in the chat here. A batsman who has repeatedly gotten out easy by the same bowler.
Oh, that's me. I'm the bunny.
I
Well,
was
it's
biting my tongue.
I mean, as the only woman in the league, I play in a 7-team league, and as the only woman, and we'll just say the batter who repeatedly gets off by the same bowlers. Yeah, I'm the bunny.
there you go. It's like the fish in poker. If you don't know who the fish is, it's you.
You're a
Mhm.
good buddy.
Yeah.
Hippity hop.
Um, so I wonder, and this is something I want to hit later, and I ask you guys later. When we get to the whole final of this thing, or not, when we get to the point where Holmes is defending these actions, I wonder if this isn't a kind of way of saying you can't, he can be illegal, but he's got to do it in a kind of righteous, moral way, and that's why he's doing it. So, all righty. We find out now what this case is about. Well, what Holmes is doing, and it's Lady Eva Brackwell, the most beautiful debutante, has written several imprudent letters when she was young, and
Naughty, naughty.
and it's interesting that it's Brackwell in the Strand and the Colliers when it's first written in the manuscript, and then there's the first two American published editions, it's Blackwell. It's changed. The R is switched out with an L. And to this day, I still see Blackwell in critical pieces and all kinds of things. It's just kind of crept in that it could be Brackwell or Blackwell, depending on your edition. But
Thinking Jeremy Brett, it was Blackwell.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, now you have me curious. I actually kind of want to see what it is in the
yeah.
manuscript.
In the manuscript, it's Brackwell. Yeah, I did
Okay,
check.
it is
Yeah.
Brackwell in the manuscript. Okay.
It was the first two American book published editions that did it. Collier's has it as Brackwell. But it got changed there, and then that just happens over time. Well, what you can tell is where somebody took their text from. They took it from the American edition,
Yep, Brackwell.
and then it would be, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but Lady Brackwell has done this, and she has commissioned Holmes to meet him and make the best terms I can. So this is what he is stuck doing. And here he comes. Footman opened the door, a small, stout man in a shaggy astrakhan overcoat. And I'll show his illustrations in a second. Astrakhan overcoat. Who else wears an astrakhan? Anybody?
The King of Bohemia and Thaddeus Sholto.
And Thaddeus Sholto, right? Yeah. Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Ornstein, Grand Duke of Kassel-Felstein and hereditary King of Bohemia, and Thaddeus Sholto are the other two characters that wear astrakhan. So
You did that so well, Ed.
that's because I have it written down. So, and here he is, and I don't know if that says something, like it's astrakhan is this from fur from the caracal lamb. Is it for Doyle? Is it ostentation for Doyle that these are the only characters that would wear that? It's not that unusual. It's not quite as pricey as like furs, but it's a little pricey. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was very pricey.
Well, maybe it was ostentatious. Maybe it was gaudy. Maybe it was just kind of an item that it's kind of like the people who emblazon themselves with like labels like Gucci. Where it's like, yes, you're buying a lot of like brand names, but it's kind of almost gaudy in its own way.
I remember
Showy. Yeah.
Showy and gaudy.
there was a U.S. president's wife bought one.
Yeah. Well, I wonder then, because it seems as if Milverton isn't the kind of person who would want to be like, or does he want to be noticed because of what he does? You would think that he'd be more like lower profile, but I guess not.
Maybe he wants to show exactly how successful he is as a blackmailer, so then that way it's intimidation tactic. I mean, which we get into a little bit later.
Yes, exactly. He's so
Yeah.
secure. that he can show it off a bit.
Yep.
Let's look at Sidney Paget. There he is, and he gets that kind of, I think, that a little bit Pickwickian here. The round face and the little glasses and the smile. I like how and Dorsteel does this too, that it looks like he's smiling and you just think that, but then if you realize once you realize he's evil, I think it looks different. Then the smile changes in perception once you think of who he is and what he's doing. And here's his Astrakhan coat, the trim there, and here he is for Dorsteel. And he's got him looking really, kind of, I mean, he uses the shadows here. So it's a lot. There's nothing really of any kind of Pickwickian benevolence about this. He's just dangerous looking in the shadows. That's the life that he leads. Where's my share? Stop share. There it is. And Holmes treats him with contempt, right? Oh, God, Rich, you were going to say something?
Why would Lady Eva hire Sherlock Holmes as opposed to a solicitor, a clergyman, a family member, somebody? Why Sherlock Holmes?
I would guess because he's outside the law, or because he often operates outside the law. Blackmail, we'll just say if she hires clergy, there's going to be judgment. If she hires a solicitor, there's going to be judgment, and also potentially, engagement in quasi-illegal action, I guess. Holmes, on the other hand, tends to operate in kind of a moral gray area. As we learned from Blue Carbuncle, letting people go, as we learned from a variety of cases where, he kind of takes the law into his own hands. So, if of all the people that, she could hire, I think Holmes seems the most reasonable.
Holmes is a private, Holmes can give her privacy that an attorney might not be able to give her because she is a woman. And the other men in her life can access what that attorney says, but because the women don't have the right to prevent that. But with Holmes, he's the kind of person that he works with. She's his client. So, and we've had that evidence in the stories, but it's the only reason I can see.
Yeah.
Go to Holmes. She wants somebody who deals with this stuff and would keep her privacy without having to talk to the family lawyer or any lawyer who's then going to tell other people in her family, especially her fiance.
Oh, yes. Discretion is necessary.
Yeah. Max had mentioned in the chat that he doesn't see him as Pickwickian because Pickwick is such a good-hearted soul. It's Watson that says it. Watson says there's something of Mr. Pickwick's benevolence in his appearance. It's that's in the story that there's this Pickwickian connection, which I will point out a couple times later leads me to think other things in this story too because of Pickwick. And for those of you who don't know, we once did a biblioventure on the Pickwick Papers. For 20 months, we did Pickwick serially once a month. They're all available on the Rosaback's YouTube channel. I love Mr. Pickwick. I don't like it when I see him as Pickwick. I mean, no, Pickwick is good. He's like the personification of good.
It's just his appearance, though. I mean,
yes.
He's so evil that you can't see it just from looking at him.
Yes, that's part of it. Yeah. He uses that look to put people off their guard.
Look at me.
Yes, we would trust you, right? Little do we know. Well, Holmes treats him with contempt right away, doesn't shake his hand, ignores his outstretched hand is what he does. Milverton asks if it's discreet to talk with Watson, and Holmes is the response we always love to hear. Dr. Watson is my friend and partner. We like those connections between the two.
Makes you wonder when the story took place is, and that Milverton didn't recognize Watson.
Yeah.
He hasn't read many of the stories, perhaps, and he's not familiar, and so it goes back like, pre
Yeah.
high 1882, 1883, as opposed to later, like other people suspect.
Yeah, it does make it seem that Milverton doesn't know who he's dealing with. Not that it matters, and that how he.
No, but that does make Rich makes a very valid point for the chronology.
Yeah.
And I was actually thinking something similar, and in terms of like placement, by the late 1890s, Holmes is a celebrity, and Watson is also a celebrity as part of
Yeah.
that.
We get that in so many stories that people recognize him and talk about Holmes as being, a famous detective. But he is his friend and partner, which I like, and then the negotiation begins. And this is the worst negotiation ever, Sherlock, okay? So, this is at Milverton, as a he says it's 7,000, and Holmes is like the alternative, and well, the alternative is, I reveal the letters, and it's 4 days they have, not paid on the 14th. There will certainly be no marriage on the 18th. And 14th is a few days from this, it seems. Is it a few days by the end of the story we get? I think. And Holmes tries to, he says, "Oh, well, it won't be that big a deal if her future husband found out." And Milford says, "You evidently do not know the Earl." And then Watson writes, "From the baffled look upon Holmes's face, I could see clearly that he did." Baffled. What's he baffled for here?
That's what I was trying to figure out, is that it's like, why would he be baffled if he knows the Earl?
He clearly did know, so he's not baffled, but he's being, I don't know, he's being baffled in this negotiation. But it's he Milverton quickly has control here, right? It's purely a matter of business, and Holmes is, and it says, Milverton says it's purely a matter of business. If you think that's in the best interest of your client, should be placed in the hands of the Earl. Okay, don't pay the money. And then Holmes is gray with anger and mortification. Anger and mortification in a negotiation are not good. It's not a good place to be. And then even says, "Wait a little, you go too fast." That's like Holmes is really off kilter. This isn't Sherlock Holmes in a sense.
Yeah, he's
how
on his
Holmes is acting to when he met Moriarty, and he knows exactly what Moriarty's thinking in that great scene where, you've already considered my answer. Yes, I have. And this one here, he's totally lost. So he's either doing it intentionally for some reason, or is baffled.
With the way, with the word, with how he's described Milverton, and with the passion that he and the intensity that he's had before he's even showed up, I have to, like, this doesn't read as an act. Like, Holmes is really upset and baffled over this whole negotiation, and how he's helpless.
Which will lead him to be so angry that he'd want to kill Milverton.
Yeah. And then Milverton goes and brags about, his triumphs, that okay, if she doesn't pay, no big deal. Then he holds up a little note with a coat of arms upon the envelope. This belongs to, well, I'm not going to reveal this till tomorrow morning. That time it'll be in the hands of the lady's husband. This is the lady's husband. Like, this comes back at the end, right? This is the letter that he's talking about. That
actually, I'm not sure it is
at the end.
I don't think it is. I think it's completely separate.
From the woman who kills him.
So from the woman who kills him, just because it seems like there is a, like, if it's something that's that recent, Holmes is not going to recognize and make the connection by the famous person. This has to be somebody,
Somebody else.
somebody else, and the person who offed Milverton in the end, I think is very, we'll just say a victim from the distant past.
Mm-hmm.
A notable victim from the distant past, but still.
Then he says, and they said, well, you surely take this money. It's better than nothing. And he says, no, this is his reasoning now. No, it's if she can't pay, that helps me better. That helps me more because it'll help me more with other cases. That people will be more willing to pay if they see that I can ruin them so well that with their compromising letters, which makes me think of Pickwick again. Chops and tomato sauce for all you Pickwickians out there. There you go. They got that one. The revealing letters of Mr. Pickwick and Mrs. Bardell. And now Holmes is just that he springs from his chair and he's just gonna take the stuff off him. Watson, jumps up, get behind him, Watson. Is it in the illustration or is it just in the story? Like Watson in the illustration, Watson's picking up a chair. Is this it? Where is it? Where's my, oh, there it is. No, yeah. And that's here's the Strand. There you go. Watson's even got a chair. He's ready to
throw down.
Like this is, WWE here, main event, man.
John Watson, man of action.
And Milverton shows him the butt of the revolver, that he's ready for this. But this is just a complete, no Holmes story starts like this. Holmes is defeated to the point where he has to assault the person who has beat him to win. This hasn't happened, right? There's no other story like this, at least up to this point.
No. This is Holmes being totally off kilter. He's on his heels.
Like Rich, you mentioned Moriarty, and when Moriarty comes in, they have this great, like they are equally, matched. And Moriarty is the most dangerous man in London or in the world. But Milverton has it over Holmes.
Well, then that's why you have to perhaps argue that this is all part of Sherlock's plan for some reason. That he would know that he wouldn't bring the papers, but he would pretend that he didn't know that he wouldn't bring the papers, and that was he interested to see if he's armed with a gun, and then he shows him the gun. So
yeah,
now, yes, he will carry a gun. So it's something to think about when I go to Appledore Towers to try to steal the papers. I'm going to have to be armed as well. I have to give Holmes credit.
Well, yeah. Usually by the end of the story, we get a kind of revelation that Holmes was doing this on purpose, or right after a scene like that Holmes was, had this in mind. But we don't get that here. As soon as he leaves now, and now that he's won for the time being and leaves, Holmes does the thinking thing. He sits by the fire, his hands buried deep in his trouser pockets, his chin sunk upon his breast. Half an hour, he's silent and still. He's thinking, like, I got to figure this out. We've seen Holmes do this countless times. And every time he does it, he figures out how to solve the case. And this time, he figures out, I just have to rob him. That there is no solution to this. That he's just going to have to rob. He doesn't say that yet, but I think
coming.
This is probably the moment when he's realized, I just have to go case the house and figure out how to get in and break in. And then he's the rakish young workman with a goatee, beard, and a swagger who lights his clay pipe at the lamp and then leaves. This is a disguise that he wears. We get the Paget doesn't just show that disguise, but Collier's Frederick Dorr Steele does, and I like this illustration. It's later in the story when we've gotten to the story's just in a column finishing up, and there's advertisements all next to it, which are wonderful. But here he is as the Sherlock Holmes in disguise as the plumber. I like that a lot. No patched leg here, patched knee. Can't really see the pipe much, but it's there. He's lighting it. And as usual, we don't get to see him work in disguise. We only hear the stories of it afterwards. We only see Holmes in disguise when he tricks Watson, or now when he's just put it on, and then he leaves because this is always by himself. So,
in the BBC version, he's got a mustache.
Yeah.
Clearly Douglas
Wilmer. The old Douglas Wilmer 65 one, right? Yeah.
With a mustache. And poor Agatha doesn't recognize him as Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, and the Jeremy Brett one, there's a reveal at the end. So with Agatha to make that less, mean.
Sketchy.
We'll get to that. But in disguise he is, and then returns, and that, well, here's what we'll talk about it. You would not call me a marrying man, Watson. No, indeed. You will be interested to hear that I am engaged. My dear fellow, I congrat to Milverton's housemaid.
What?
Yeah, it was Holmes' defense. He was a most necessary step. I am a plumber with a rising business. I have walked out with her each evening, and I have talked with her. Good heavens, those talks. However, I got all I wanted. I know Milverton's house as I know the palm of my hand. And Watson, this is just some days. We don't know exactly how many days it is. Just for some days, Holmes came and went at all hours. But the girl Holmes, Watson says, shrugged his shoulders. You can't help it, my dear Watson. You must play your cards as best you can when such a stake is on the table. However, I rejoice to say that I have a hated rival who will certainly cut me out the instant that my back is turned. What a splendid night it is. Like, he is not concerned with Agatha, right? We'll find out her name later, Agatha.
One thing I discovered, he used the term "my hated rival," and he used the term "hated rival" in the story "Retired Colorman," which takes place, I think, in the case just before Charles Augustus Milverton, and that was Barker, who was the detective. And you had not met Barker. He's my hated rival on the Surrey shore, who was investigating. And so you wonder if somebody else was investigating, playing the role that Holmes was, and had tried to ingratiate himself with Agatha also.
Yeah. We don't get who the hated rival is in this, right? Like, yeah, it never turns out who it is. I'm just thinking of the adaptation. I'm like, no, it's the blacksmith at the house, right? No, that was the Jeremy Brett movie.
Yeah. Man, I have to admit, this is where there's like, as a woman, this is like so ethically and morally questionable. I mean, and to be fair, like Lindsay Fay actually wrote a really, really great article dealing with kind of like the reprehensible aspects of what this dynamic is, and the fact that Holmes totally and utterly disregarded the emotional impact on Agatha. It was a fascinating read. There's an article published online somewhere by Lindsay Fay. Yeah, this is this kind of makes me a little cringy about Holmes, as a woman of that he would be in such complete and utter disregard for her emotional state if
Yeah.
she's engaged.
Nick Utekin wrote, with brutal disregard for the girl's feelings and for her to have agreed to an engagement within only a few days, she must have been relatively simple mind, which makes the whole episode reek the worse. Holmes exploited her disgracefully, and joking about a hated rival is no mitigation. Holmes could easily have found out about the layout of Appledore Towers and its owner's evening habits by other means.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we also read
Bless
this.
you, Nick.
We also read this with the fact that, oh, he has made her fall in love with him, that's why she wants to marry him. Well, that's not the only reason why people want to get married, and especially in the past, it can very much be a business arrangement that she has met this man who wants to marry her, and he happens to be a successful businessman in his plumbing business, and her as a servant in the house seems like this is a really good deal that I get to make. And this is not unusual for people at that time to make. And and people still take these factors into consideration now. I mean, that actually does still happen, but the expectation now is that if you're going to get married, you love each other. That's actually not what's going on here. I mean, well, we don't know that that is what's going on here. I mean, I don't think I'm trying to stretch it too much to defend
Mm-hmm.
Holmes in this case. I just think that he has met this servant, and this isn't unusual at all in a few days to make this. It's like, hey, I think that, we could be married and that would be successful. And she said, yeah. But but he was lying the whole time.
If you watch the Jeremy Brett version, he's with
Uh,
Agatha and she wants a kiss, and Holmes says, I don't know how.
yeah. Yeah.
That was like a moment of honesty that I really
There's
appreciated.
some
Yeah.
cringeworthiness there.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in that one with
Yeah,
Holmes and Agatha, but
yeah,
and they try to defend, I think, Holmes in that way, and that he understands that what he's doing, and it hurts him.
yeah.
But I'm glad to see Claire's mentioned in the chat, breach of promise. Again, I'm thinking
Yep.
Mr. Pickwick. This is a big part of Pickwick Papers, the breach of promise trial. Because that is what's going on here. This is a breach of promise, that he has said, marry me, and he didn't mean he was lying. But the real crux, though, is that I'm trying to save a woman's reputation and honor and her life, and stop a bad guy. And this is the sketchy stuff I have to do. Does the means justify the end here? For Holmes, it does. He doesn't think that there's a big deal, and his reason is because, she's just going to marry this other guy anyway. Um, uh, so I don't know, but it's sketchy. Is it more than sketchy, Monica?
It's it's sketchy. I mean, here's the thing, is that like I will in this day and age, I can appreciate the level of sketchiness that this is. This is like hella big sketchy. This is not just little bits of sketchy. This is hella big sketchy. I understand why Holmes is doing this. From Holmes's perspective, this is just the pursuit of of a means to an end. But from Agatha's perspective, she's getting her heart broken. She's basically getting like this promise of a life and a
Mhm.
world
Yeah.
and access and everything, like this whole idea of what life will be like with Escott the plumber. And basically he's promising her the world and not being able to deliver.
Carla
It's
Kessinger
it's
Coop
it's it's
wrote an
kind of
article.
reprehensible.
Carla Kessinger Coop wrote an article in the one of
Mhm.
the latest Baker Street journals that Mycroft Holmes used her as a plant,
Ooh, I
and
haven't read that one yet, but
Yeah.
she killed Milverton.
Yeah, she delivered that at Sons of Copper Beaches meeting. So that,
Ah,
yeah,
things that I miss when I don't come to
yes.
Philly.
Um, they but Watson right away thinks, yeah, of the girl. So Watson thinks that that it's certainly, morally questionable what Holmes has been doing. But Holmes thinks that it is worth it.
I
Is
mean, from his perspective, I get it. I really do. But that's kind of the key is that we don't always consider the collateral damage.
Yeah.
And as a therapist, what do I deal with? I deal with people's collateral damage.
It's a class thing going on here too. Holmes is of a gentlemanly class, and she's a servant. She's just gonna have somebody else marry her anyway. Like,
Okay.
so it's not, I'm not really doing much.
Lady Eva
Yep.
in the upper class.
Yeah. So, and now Holmes reveals his master plan that he has put together, and that he's just going to burgle. He says, I mean to burgle Milverton's house tonight. And I've never thought like, hey, why is the burgle the verb and burglar, like, where does that word even come from? I looked it up. Burgle is actually a back formation from burglar. Like, there was a burglar was a word of somebody who, steals. And so, so in a sense, a burglar is not one who burgles, but to burgle is something that is done by a burglar. Uh,
Fascinating.
yeah. But the origin is uncertain. We're not even sure where the word comes from. It just kind of appears. It's probably Anglo-French, but we're not quite even sure where it derived from. So, but anyway, to burgle. He's going to burgle him, which is illegal. I'm going to break into his house and steal something.
What's interesting is Holmes has been away. He's dressed as Escott. He's away. He's away. He comes and goes, comes and goes. Why doesn't he just break in at night? Because he's been away. Why does he tell Watson, I'm going to burgle Milverton's estate? And then that gives, I think, from the writer's perspective, from Doyle's perspective, it's so that Watson can be there to witness everything. And then Watson can show this, that he's upset. But he didn't have to tell Watson.
Usually he doesn't.
And so this time he tells him, and so Watson then says, "Oh no, I've got to come with you, or else I'm going to go to the police right away." So then he gets Watson to come along with him. He doesn't need Watson. He's going to break in. He breaks through the glass by himself, breaks the safe by himself. He doesn't
Yeah.
need.
He tells him he doesn't want him to come anyway.
Right.
So, but
Or does he?
well,
Yeah.
yeah, because of course Watson's going to go, once you say this to him. But yeah, usually for Holmes is what it is like, oh, are you free tonight? There might be danger, Like, he doesn't tell Watson anything about what they're doing until they go out and do it. But here he tells him right off the bat, and then even a little bit later he tells him the plan. Watson's never privy to this kind of stuff, but it's different because now Holmes is like, I have to actually do something illegal. So this is the plan and how we have to do this. And it would help him for Watson to know the plan. Watson, I had a catching of the breath, and my skin went cold at the words, which were slowly uttered in a tone of concentrated resolution. I'm thinking first, like, wow, he thinks this is horrible. He can't be. But then it's the detection, the capture, the honored career ending in irreparable failure and disgrace. This is what Watson was worried about. Like, oh no, what if you get caught? Um, and then here's where Holmes has the solution here. I'm just still shocked. This is the weirdest Sherlock Holmes story. Sherlock figures out how to beat the villain in every story. And he doesn't. Like he's completely defeated. And so he just has to break. It's like he's the Punisher, right?
Yeah.
Um, instead of capturing him and doing anything, he just turns into the Punisher all of a sudden. Well, and he's not, because he doesn't. He's not saying I'm going to go kill
Yeah,
him.
he's well, as far as we are aware.
It's also another story where if Holmes was not involved, everything would end the same.
It's true. But if Holmes, because Holmes was involved, we have witnesses and therefore we know what happened.
The point of these stories is how brilliant Sherlock Holmes is and how he comes up with these fantastic, ways of solving a problem. And I think it's the brilliance of this story is that Doyle writes a story where Holmes doesn't come up with a brilliant solution. And I think the story still works. And I think it's almost interesting because of that. It's like I wind up loving this story so much because of that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, it's like this is the first time that we see Holmes actually like kind of out of his depth and then having to scramble.
Yeah. All right. And now he has to give the moral justifications. You will admit that the action, he tells Watson, is morally justifiable, though technically criminal. And Watson agrees. He says it is morally justifiable so long as our object is to take no articles save those which are used for an illegal purpose. And Holmes says, surely a gentleman should not lay much stress upon this when a lady is in most desperate need of help.
Chivalry is not dead.
Yes. So yeah. And that's for me, this is the answer to Raffles, that story for those who have, read that story. And you can go read it. It's online. There's great, annotated versions online that you could read of those stories. But especially when you add that chivalrous component to this, right? It's the Victorian man's duty to break the law in this case, right? Because I have to protect these vulnerable women, and this is why it's so important to Holmes and to Doyle. I think this is a thing with Doyle, especially if you read his medieval historical novels too. If this were a case about homosexual men being blackmailed, we'd be like, well,
Whatever.
they're men and they lost control and now they get punished. But women are powerless, and this is this thing that enables them to, kind of have this, or to maintain this outdated thing of chivalry that they do. So anyway.
And for the chronologist out there, this Watson's reaction that he could see him go to jail and all of that kind of stuff tends to be after Reichenbach because he lost his friend and now he's got him back again and he doesn't want anything bad to happen. That's one part. And the other thing is Holmes says, well, my dear fellow, we shared the same room for some years, and it would be amusing if we ended sharing the same cell. So it shows that they've been together for a longer period of time, which would be closer to 1899.
Yeah. But Watson is deliberately changing things to throw us off the scent. So
That's what
although one could also make the argument they've been roommates. They were roommates from 1881, which is when Study in Scarlet was more or less set, all the way up through at least 1888, which is when Sign of Four is set. And as such, there's already 7 years there that they were roommates. Therefore, it could still be earlier. That's several years and shared rooms together. So one could argue that this is actually set earlier versus the 1899.
This is me with chronologists.
Yep. This is why. Yes.
What? No, no, I love this stuff. I
Yeah.
don't like to do it myself. It drives me crazy. But
Yeah. This is
for
usually why
those,
I consult the chronologist
yes,
before I speak on such matters. But still,
for those who can deal
yeah,
with the crazy, I appreciate them dealing with the crazy. Go
exactly.
out and
I
read.
salute you.
So, well,
Get a
Holmes says I must play this last card. It's the only way to get back the letters. And then he says it's a sporting duel between this fellow Milverton and me. He had, as you saw, the best of the first exchanges, but my self-respect and my reputation are concerned to fight it to a finish.
Is that a foreshadowing of something to come?
just a little.
Well, it's also a very much a, it's he kicked my ass. I have to beat him and I can't, so I'm just gonna steal the stuff to beat him. But it's, but it does make it all about him. Like he can't believe that Milverton has defeated him and he has to do something no matter how desperate it is
A
to
little ego might be involved here.
yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah, well, and that is Sherlock, and that's fine. That's, he knows how good he is.
Gotta
Uh,
prove it.
Watson insists on going, um, and Holmes says no, and he says, "Well, then you're not going. I'll go right to the police if you don't let me go. You can't help me. How do you know? I can make a mask. Is what I can do." um, Holmes looked annoyed, but his brow cleared and he clapped me on the shoulder because this is about Holmes and Watson. It's always about Holmes and Watson. It's about their friendship. My dear fellow, be it so. We have shared, this is what you said, Rich, they shared the same room. Maybe we'll end it by sharing a cell. Ha 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 ha. Um, and uh, and then Holmes says, I would have made an highly efficient criminal. He says this more than once. He says it another time in one of the later stories, well, I think we haven't gotten to yet, but uh I do remember in Greek Interpreter, which we've done, when he opens the window of the house to break in, Gregson says, "It is a mercy that you were on the side of the force and not against it." So Holmes is good at this.
You
Uh,
broke into the retired colorman Josiah Amberley's house when
yeah,
Watson and Amberley had to go
that's
visit.
later. We didn't get to that story yet.
Okay, and he's going to break into Baron Gruner's house,
Yeah.
and
Oh, is this the beginning? Is this when he starts breaking in the places and
yeah, and then Oberstein's house in Bruce Partington plans.
this is it. This is well, a Greek interpreter he does, but it's kind of like they had to wait for a long time to get a. He did wait to get a search warrant, and
Mhm.
it foiled them actually because he had to wait that long. And then to break into the house, he uses the window to get in, but they actually get a search warrant first. Um, so by now, it's Holmes is like, yeah, the heck with that. I'm just gonna, or Doyle writing the stories, the heck with that. Just break in. Like that would make sense. And Holmes now has this kit, um, this up-to-date burgling kit with a nickel-plated jemmy, diamond-tipped glass cutter, adaptable keys, every modern improvement which a march of civilization demands. Um, and This was pointed out in the facsimile edition, The Worst Man in London book. But I also have shared these on one of the other episodes of Sherlock Mondays in the Strand magazine. Beginning in February 1894, they had a series called Crimes and Criminals. And the first part was Dynamite and Dynamiters, because that wasn't a thing then. And in March 1894, it was Burglars and Burgling. And it's a whole series with photos of things. Here it is. This is the Dynamite and Dynamiters. Let me skip down here. And here it is. burglars and burglaring. And look, there's the kit. It's like a how to become a successful burglar in the Strand magazine. You could read all
Which is
about it.
amazing.
They, talk about, they tell you all the stories. Look, here's the lanterns. They take a lantern too. This is what they have. If you want to know, kids, how to effectively be a burglar, this is how you do it. Here's some
pics.
Yeah, some jemmies here, like
Yep.
the pry the door open, and there's coming up here. There it is. You mentioned the
Ooh.
hat and a mask. This is a mask attached to a hat. So like you can tuck this up in the hat and then pull it out, and then there's a strap that go under your chin.
I want one of those. I want one of those so bad.
That's it. The new North Road mask. Get
That's
one
what Holmes
today.
and Watson are wearing in the 1965 version,
Yeah.
BBC
Yeah.
version, as they're running away.
That's why it was connected to the hat and all one piece, so it'd make it easy. So
It's not going
That's
to fall off as
fantastic.
you run and jump over a 6-foot wall.
right. So Holmes has this special kit right here. So it's all you need. The safe breaker's outfit. This is what you need, people. It's basically a drill set with a couple, pry bars here, jemmies to pry something open. And he is ready. He is prepared. He is a criminal ready to, go into business, like Raffles had been doing in his stories for a few years before this was published.
Watson says later on, as he's breaking into the safe, that he used to practice breaking in the safes, which made me wonder, where would he get the safes to break into in practice?
Yeah, I guess he'd have to, well, he practices everything. He finds a butcher with a big pig he can practice a harpoon on. He could find somebody to let him practice on a safe, maybe, as long as he's not damaging it.
If you have resources, you can do just about anything.
Well, every good burglar needs a mask, and Watson, says I can make a couple out of black silk. But before that, he says, have you a pair of silent shoes? And he says, I have rubber-soled tennis shoes.
The question is, does Watson play tennis?
Yeah.
I thought he was a rugby player.
It's
Wait, no, that's later.
and this gave me a good answer in The Worst Man in London here. This is from 1887, the Shoe and Leather Report. Okay, if you're looking, April 7, 1887, the Shoe and Leather Report, in case you want to look it up. Shoes of some sort with rubber soles have been worn at tennis for a number of years, but recently manufacturers have given these more attention and have found in them possibilities at first not dreamed of. The very qualities that make it useful to the tennis player recommended for wear other than as a sporting shoe. The farmer in the fresh cut meadow or walking the stubble to harvest the yachtsman on the deck of his boat. So tennis shoes were starting to be marketed for other purposes than tennis. And I look for advertisements. The only advertisement I was able to come up with was this one from 1905. This was a year after the story was published. The United States Rubber Company tennis shoes. And they're not playing tennis, they're playing basketball. And well, females playing basketball.
Actually, that's probably what the netball. That's yeah. Yeah, that's sorry, there's a thing in Iowa where there's like a old school version of basketball that they still play.
It says the bottom. They say this basketball is a
Oh,
great
basketball.
game. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But it's a low net. These girls can just dunk. Let me tell you, with this net here. But it's wear the champion tennis shoes. So there you go.
Yeah, netball versus basketball. Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's the funny thing is that maybe during that era, that was actually still referred to as basketball, but to modern era with the kind of like lowness of the net, that's netball.
Yeah. Well, and what I think is funny is how baggy professional basketball shorts have gotten again. And look, it's kind of not that far here. These
Oh,
baggy
I
shirts.
didn't real I haven't watched in a while. Are we back to the 90s?
Oh, yeah, very baggy
Oh
shorts.
my gosh, we're back to the 90s shorts.
Or maybe they've reduced since the 90s. I don't know, but
Well,
yeah,
they were in the 90s where they were like almost knee length, and
yeah.
then they got short and
Oh, they got shorter
long again.
since. Yeah, I like the 1980s ones.
Oh,
Late.
the ones that
Oh
basically,
yeah,
yeah, the like mid thigh.
basketball. Yeah,
Yeah,
men's shorts are supposed to be.
yeah. They went short for a while, and I think they might have gotten longer again. But yeah,
All righty. Um, but Watson has his tennis shoes, likely not for tennis. I also distinctly remember as a child that older people would call sneakers tennis shoes. Oh, you're in your tennis shoes. And I'm like, I never played tennis in my life. Like, I didn't understand what they were saying because I don't play tennis. They just meant sneakers. And it did become a common term for sneakers that lasted until at least the 1970s. I'm not sure if anybody still refers to just plain old athletic shoes as tennis shoes, but
they do.
yeah. So there you go. Sneakers is more common these days, at least around here.
Not in the
Well,
Midwest. It's still tennis shoes.
yeah, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, they are going to go to Appledore Towers, and they head out to do that. They drove to the address in Hampstead. They walked along the edge of the heath, Hampstead Heath. Bloofer Lady, Dracula. This is where the Bloofer Lady in Dracula, Lucy Westenra, after she becomes a vampire, preys upon the children in there because it's right next to the cemetery that she's in, and there you go. So I like the Dracula connection there. The plan we find out is the documents are in the safe. Milverton's a heavy sleeper. Holmes knows where the room is. And also the dog is going to be locked up by Agatha. Um, she's been locking the dog up so he can visit. Agatha, that's my fiance. It says as a little joke there, a little chuckle. Holmes doesn't care about Agatha. Um, uh,
So if she locked the dog up, would she be waiting for Holmes to show up?
yeah, yeah. Well, he's not going to show up anymore, Agatha. So,
He is a thing of your past.
yeah. And they arrive, and Holmes removes a circle of glass. There's and takes it out like a good, housebreaker. And then we had become felons in the eyes of the law. There it is. Now they're felons. They've broken the law, but not technically yet. Well, I don't know. I don't know if this kind of break and entering is a felony or misdemeanor in late Victorian law. I don't know if Rich, if you would know that or not.
It's a felony. Every person who breaks and enters the dwelling house of another with the intent to commit a felony therein should be
With the
guilty.
intent to commit a felony makes it a felony. Okay.
And then 9 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Yeah. Wasn't that part of the law too, that it was only at night?
Yeah, so that made it a life maximum. Housebreaking, if it was after 6 a.m. and before 9 p.m., the penalty would be 14 years.
Wow.
Interesting. So daytime robberies were so much sorry, let me rephrase that. Daytime B&Es, breaking and enterings, were less punishable.
Yep.
Fascinating.
Only 14 years.
Yeah, but still, it's a lighter sentence.
And those guys would be transported to Australia.
Fascinating.
Well, they wouldn't be transported then. The transportation still wasn't going on in this late time. So that is fascinating though. I love the time difference that. All righty. While they're in the house, Holmes had remarkable powers, carefully cultivated, of seeing in the dark. That's like superpowers, right? He can see in the dark.
Holmes suddenly became, Daredevil.
He is a superhero. I mean, you can make a strong case that this is,
Oh, I have.
yeah, that of our modern conception of superheroes, that there are precursors and all, but Holmes really kind of embodies most of the traits of how we define superheroes. So clearly Batman, right? We get a little jump scare, a little false jump scare here. Something rushed out at us and my heart sprang into my mouth, but I could have laughed when I realized that it was the cat.
This
That's
is great writing here. The suspense just keeps building as they go through the dark. And they hear noises, they hear heavy footsteps, they hear creaks from chairs,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden Milverton is there, right in front of us, almost within our reach.
It's atmospheric as heck.
Yeah.
It's
And then
amazing.
the safe, he looks at the safe. Oh my God, the safe is partially open.
Well, yeah, we do get this great description leading up to it, the suspense in the dark. There's a marble bust of Athene on the top. Makes me think of the Raven. And but the outer door isn't bolted. The door leading to the other part of the house, and so it was neither locked nor bolted, and so Watson's a little concerned. Holmes says, I don't like it. So now we get more suspense, like, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to be right. Why isn't this door locked? Is it a trap? It's not. But
And Watson is great because at that point he decides he's going to spring out, throw his greatcoat over his head, pinion Milverton.
Oh, not yet. We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, let's lead up to that still, because Watson still has this. We still have to get more kind of definition of what they're doing is kind of moral, without, even though it's illegal. And he says, and it thrills him that he gets to do something illegal. The high object of our mission, the consciousness that it was unselfish and chivalrous, the villainous character of our opponent, all added to the sporting interest of the adventure. That this is a thrilling thing for Watson. Loves the action and the thrill of it, and now the fact that we're breaking the law.
Wait, it's Judas Priest, all of a sudden breaking the law.
Yeah.
But no, actually, this speaks to Watson's PTSD, by the way. That basically he misses the chase, he misses the excitement. That he's not repelled by it, but he's excited by it. And I'm going to remember this in order to kind of we'll just say include it in the next edition of my my treatise on PTSD and Watson, because this is additional evidence that he's, we'll just say, wanting to basically be part of it. And it's not so much that PTSD lends itself to antisocial, we'll just say, societal engagement, but it's more about the excitement and the thrill, and
that adrenaline rush, that kind of thing.
rush,
Yeah,
exactly. And acting kind of counter to societal standards, doing the things that we're not really supposed to do, can lend itself to one hell of a thrill. The adrenaline rush is addictive.
Yeah, it is for
Oh yeah.
for not just if you're in that situation.
Oh
but
no. I've bungee jumped and jumped out of perfectly good airplanes, and I've done a few
jumped out of airplanes.
Oh, dude, yeah, I went skydiving a few times. We'll just say is that the whole idea is basically pushing pushing the limits, and that adrenaline rush. You get the adrenaline, you get the dopamine. There's nothing quite like it when you're opening up the flood that you can't get from anything else. But this is also what lends itself to drug addiction and a lot of other antisocial behavior. So I find mine in life enhancing ways versus, which is extreme sports and other things. But yeah. I appreciate why Watson is thrilled here.
It's like attending a Crew of the Bark Lone Star meeting.
Darn right it is.
Well, Rich, you were next to dangerous criminals, and so you got to fulfill that part, that danger part.
Man, I worked in a prison, 40 hours at a time for 2 years, with rapists and murderers and other things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Watson also brings more, it kind of continues this kind of chivalrous, idea here by using the safe as the metaphor, that confronted with the green and gold monster, the safe, the dragon, which held in its maw the reputations of many fair ladies, except not Agatha, but um uh and I'd say that because this story does that. In this story, Agatha, the lower class woman, doesn't matter, but
Nope.
the upper class women do.
It
But
it is
in
very
Sherlock
classic.
Holmes stories in general, Holmes doesn't care about that.
Well,
In
it's
general,
very, yeah.
Holmes helps everyone regardless of their class. So that's usually
Well,
what we get with Holmes. This seems to be the outlier.
yeah. I mean, and that is true. Is that he helps everyone out, regardless of class. But it's a lot easier to, we'll just say, morally justify engaging with the lower classes in a more, we'll just say, kind of expendable way.
And those classes don't suffer from reputation and honor as the other classes do in these stories.
At least not as publicly.
Yeah. So that's not the reason to help them. But it is the reason to help other people in stories. And that's something I want to talk about when we get to the end of this.
Mm.
But now's where, they hear a noise, and Holmes stuffs all the things in his pockets, and um uh and then Milverton walks in, and they're peeping behind the curtain to see him, uh to see him come in here. He had apparently been sitting up in the smoking or billiard room, as one has. I wish I had them. I do have a smoking room. It happens to be my library. He's got his cigar, his smoking jacket, claret colored with a black velvet collar. Like the little detail there we get for him. He lives luxuriously, is what we're being told. Um, and he's blowing rings of tobacco smoke as he's reading this document. He's not concerned that anything, he's completely at ease. We get more suspense in that the door of the safe was imperfectly closed. So there's that tension now it's being created here, that like, oh, he's near the safe, it's not closed, will he see it? And then this is Rich, you were saying about Watson, right?
Yep, he says he's gonna get his coat and put it over his head and let Holmes do the rest.
Yeah. That if he notices it or something wrong, Watson would jump out and, and tackle him.
Adrenaline is really kicked in
Yeah.
for him now.
Yeah, Watson, man of action.
He's ready. Yeah. This is his plan. This is why Holmes needed him, I guess, maybe. Or Watson think like, this is why I need to be here. I'll almost get caught later, but this is helpful. Milverton then the woman comes in, a tall, slim, dark woman, a veil over her face, a mantle drawn round her chin, quivering with emotion. She's come to meet him. He says, if the Countess is a hard mistress, you can get even with her. She's got letters to sell him. And let's see. Well, we'll look at all the pictures after she shoots him. And then he's, good God, is it you? And without a word, she raises her veil and drops the mantle from her chin. It was a dark, handsome, clear-cut face, a face with a curved nose, strong dark eyebrows, shading hard, glittering eyes, and a straight, thin-lipped mouth set in a dangerous smile. He's not prepared for her. Like he knows she's coming, but right?
Sounds like he's expecting someone else.
Well, he's expecting someone to come sell him letters, but
Yeah.
he knows he's expecting a woman.
But not this woman.
Yes, and also he doesn't, like, when Holmes goes to get him, he's like, whoa, he's ready. I got the gun. Like he jumps out of the way. He's ready when he has to deal with men. But if this is just some woman coming to sell him letters, he has no fear of her.
It's like
Oh,
Count
yeah.
Albert's maid coming.
Yeah, he always controls women, Milverton. This is what he does for a living. He controls women. And here he doesn't have to.
Well, yeah, I mean, but from a societal perspective, women have like many fewer rights than men, and
Yeah.
so it's a lot easier to victimize them.
Why would he need a gun? I'm just,
Exactly.
I'm in charge of you. And
Easy to underestimate women.
not this time.
Oh no.
It is I, the woman whose life you have ruined. Now, I mentioned this to you guys earlier. Um, this really hit me this time. This kind of way over the top melodrama in the, not necessarily the action. I think the action's fine. I think the way the scene plays out works and the way Watson describes it works. But the dialogue is so right off the melodramatic stage. I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. Like it is,
I can't pay the rent.
it is exactly what it is. The woman whose life you have ruined, and he laughs. Why did you drive me to such extremities? You sent the letters to my husband, and he, the noblest gentleman that ever. Like I expected, like turning to the audience and doing this speech to them. You never thought to see me. Well, Charles Milverton, what have you to say? I mean, this is the strangest dialogue that I've come across in a Sherlock
Great. It's
story.
great.
Rich, I adamantly disagree. And so just remember, take that and that and that.
Oh, you've done me, Monica.
Oh,
Right?
oh
You
my
will
God.
you will ruin no more lives as you ruined mine. You will wring no more hearts as you wrung mine. I will free the world of a poisonous thing. Take that, you hound, and that, and that, and that, and that. I mean, and it's not because we're like, oh, but it wasn't a cliche then. No, it was a cliche then. Um, so way over the top melodrama, but what we've discovered is that he, you know, he has given letters to her husband. This is why I thought it was the same one, but is it you sent the letters to my husband and he, noblest gentleman that ever lived, had a heart attack and died, I guess. Broke his gallant heart and died.
Broke his gallant heart, which I'm
Because
guessing
this could have been days ago.
days or years. I'm thinking years because at this point she's had I think she has had years to basically kind of plan how to infiltrate Milverton's household and kind of plan this ambush, if you will. Years of basically like dealing with the ramifications of his death, which I'm guessing actually was probably a suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Not a heart attack or like just a broken heart. I'm thinking it was suicide. That he blackmailed her and ruined her life and basically ended his, and that this is the ultimate revenge for the suicide of her husband. Monica's running theory here, but
Yeah, I just find no evidence that any time has passed within the story.
there's no evidence that time has passed, but there's no evidence that time hasn't passed.
Yeah.
And contextually, when you have this level of like revenge plot,
Mm-hmm.
revenge is the dish best served
Yeah.
cold. I mean, Klingon proverb, by the way. Um, thank
In
you,
the
Ed.
original Klingon.
Exactly. You've never read Sherlock Holmes until you've read it in the original Klingon. Um, but yeah, revenge is a dish best served cold. And from what I'm gathering here is that this level of intensity, this level of kind of like coldness,
Mm-hmm.
this feels like it's been years, not just days or weeks.
It's hard to schedule this thing because she has to schedule either herself just in a disguise because there's no, I can't call him up and say, can I come over? So it's got to be an in-person or a note passed to him. So either she gets one of her servants to go there and say, can you schedule a meeting? or she goes disguised somehow, which
Yeah.
I don't believe. I think that she would have sent somebody else.
Yeah, this feels like time has passed. I mean, again, there's no evidence, but it just contextually it just feels like it's been kind of burning on the on the back burner for a long time.
Yes.
She might have to do it herself because if she hires or if she uses her maid to do it, now the maid can blackmail her.
Hmm.
So it makes more sense that she's got to disguise herself and then go there somehow to set up the meeting at midnight. She meets Milverton somewhere else disguised and says, I'll bring the papers at midnight. Okay, come here at this time."
Yeah.
Then she can do the killing while there's some privacy.
Yeah.
And because he's not expecting her, he's expecting someone else. She's had to set up, like a false identity. Because he's expecting some random maid, not her.
Hmm.
So, there's forethought here, which is indicative of time
Yeah.
passing.
All righty. Let's look at some pictures too.
Okay.
I passed over this earlier and I wanted to share it. There they are in their black masks.
Oh, yes.
I love it.
Attached to the hats.
Holmes
Notice-
is more like a domino mask here, just like the small with just the eye hold, but Watson's is hanging down. You got to cover the mustache or somebody's going to know who it is.
Notice the hats though. Watson's got the bowler,
Yeah.
and Holmes has the newsboy cap there.
Yeah. Just a regular old cap, newsboy cap. Well, yeah. And in his evening dress. So I don't know. Like, this isn't the hat for that outfit.
Nope.
But
Because they rode to the theater as if
Yeah.
they were leaving the theater, and who goes to the theater with that type of a hat?
Although it is the type of hat that you can shove in your pocket,
Yeah.
which I frequently do with my flat caps.
But he was a gentleman. He needed a hat. He couldn't go out the house without a hat. So, well, they don't need that. They don't need to worry about that anyway. I mean, they're just dropped off at the Heath, and now they're going to hightail it back on their own.
In the 65 BBC version, they both have top hats as they're running away and jumping.
Here she is confronting him. And he doesn't expect anything there until she pulls out the gun and empties the barrels. Doyle does this all the time. When he means chambers, he writes barrels. The Hound, he does this too. But there she is, plugging away at him. That's at least one of the vats right there. But I like this illustration a lot. I love the glow of the explosion right here before it hits him. Or maybe that's the second that, because he's already staggered, like he's already been hit. And that's Paget. Door Steel didn't do that. And then see, and it's all like it's this melodrama. This is usually what you get. But then we get something else. Well, she empties it all. She's she's just shooting his body. And then she says, he says, right? No, we get more melodrama. You've done me. That's silly, but hey, you want your last words, right? And then the woman looked at him intently and ground her heel into his upturned face.
Oh man.
That's
That's
a detail I
personal.
don't expect.
That's personal.
Yeah.
That is a woman scorned. That is hell being unleashed on the ultimate villain. Like, that she is just reveling in, I have killed this man. I am going to basically like trounce on his face. I have to admit, I love that. I love that line just because it shows the level of passion, and hatred for this man.
Yeah.
Now we're even.
Exactly. The score has been evened.
Yeah. Because he's dead. And she does.
Yeah, but now it's an ultimate extra humiliation.
And he won't do it ever again to any other woman.
Exactly.
And then the final brilliant detail of this, Watson says, I heard a sharp rustle. The night air blew into the heated room, and the Avenger was gone. She like
Kaiser.
disappears. I love that. Like Batman. She just disappears in the mist. So very cool.
And then Watson's strong. He wants to stop it.
Yeah.
And prevents him.
Yeah. He says, I was about to spring out when she starts to shoot him, but I felt Holmes's cold, strong grasp upon my wrist. I understood the whole argument of that firm restraining grip, that it was no affair of ours, that justice had overtaken a villain, that we had our own duties and our own objects, which were not to be lost sight of. Not our business if somebody shoots him. Now, this isn't sporting, Sherlock, okay? You said sporting duel earlier.
Russell Merritt wrote that Holmes was there to protect the woman.
Yeah.
In the event that anything happened.
Yeah. That if something happened, he would have protected her, but he's certainly not going to help Milverton out of this. Is this another crime?
Rich?
Committed?
Well, there's a burglary for Holmes. It's not a crime. He doesn't have to prevent the crime. He's just a witness there. And then he has no...
Because he didn't know it was going to happen, right?
He has no duty to report the crime afterwards. Like I can talk about it later when Lestrade...
Yeah. But yeah, it's, all right. Doyle's now writing a story where I'm not going to say Sherlock is going to go and kill somebody, and he doesn't. But if somebody does, Sherlock's going to be like, woo, okay, that's fine by me, which is only like a little different. Like, I don't think that that's that morally different in wanting to kill him and watching someone else do it and being okay with it. So, I mean, is it like, I mean, if you're okay with someone killing them, does it really matter if you killed them then?
Well, it's the difference between pulling the trigger and just like witnessing a thing.
Being glad somebody pulled the trigger?
Well, we'll just say that the difference between action and thought, and I think, Rich might be able to attest to this. Oftentimes there are various degrees of like culpability. This is why we have homicide versus manslaughter, correct, Rich?
Yes.
Exactly. It's like levels of intent as well as levels of culpability.
If Holmes steals all these things out of that safe, he's going to save his client and he's going to save all those people whose things in that safe. And then Milverton is just going to go and get more letters and do it to other people, and nothing has been solved except a few people have been saved, and that's good. But Holmes, in his way of dealing with this, demonstrates that he could not stop Milverton. He can only stop him from hurting certain people by stealing from him. That's the only way he could stop him, to help these people, but he couldn't stop Milverton. But this woman can stop him by killing him. It's like Doyle gets it both ways. Like, I get to, he gets to have his cake and eat it too. I don't know. That's right.
It's an elegant solution.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot in the stories. Baron Gruner, Kitty Winter throws acid.
We gotta stop talking about future stories.
Yeah, no spoilers, no spoilers.
Okay, Second Stain. Did we do Second Stain yet? Eduardo Lucas.
Nope, we haven't done that either. Yeah, we'll just say this is that.
Well, but it's interesting to note that this is something that will
experience this, but it will not be the last time we've experienced.
Yeah, this is something that will now come to play in these stories, which I think is interesting. In that, at this point, Doyle's written a lot of Holmes stories, and by his own admission, he has trouble coming up with these plot ideas going forward, and so now he's starting to stretch that. And in this story, we get complete stretch in that Holmes is baffled, can't solve a problem, and then has to resort to just, burglary to resolve it. And then and it gets resolved because someone else comes in and murders the person. That's entirely different than what we've had going up to this point. And this is where he goes, and then he goes to the safe, picks all the letters up, throws them all in the fire. They're all, none of those people will, be harmed by this now. And then they make their escape. Now the servants show up. I could not believe that an alarm could have spread so swiftly, Watson writes. Really? Like, how many gunshots did you take? The servants were going to show up. They raised a view halloo
yes.
to get them. Always makes you think of Mary Poppins.
Actually, makes me think of 221B by Starrett, the view halloo.
Oh yes, the view halloo and Starrett, of course.
Which is the first thing that I thought of at that point.
Yeah. They jump over the wall, a 6-foot wall. And Holmes gets right over, and Watson, of course, gets grabbed by the ankle. I kick myself free, scrambled over the glass-strewn coping. People don't know what that was, is that they would take broken glass and attach the top walls with cement. So it was so you would get really cut up on top of it. It's what they used to have before barbed wire. But they escape, and they run for 2 miles, which is a lot.
It is a lot,
For
especially
the area when you look at the map. And several Sherlockians have pointed this out. Really, what do they do? Run all over the heath? But Watson is not in this story hampered at all by his old war wounds. That is sure.
Adrenaline.
Yeah.
Adrenaline.
Wouldn't be in an escape. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, as somebody who has really, really not great knees from college soccer injuries, when push comes to shove, if I'm scared enough, if I'm pushing it hard enough, if I've got enough adrenaline coursing through my body, it doesn't matter about how crappy my knees are. I will run. I will run, and I will run hard. And then I will hurt the next week afterwards, but it doesn't matter. When there is danger.
All righty. Well, maybe that's what I need for this arthritic hip of mine. Maybe if I felt danger, I'd be fine.
There we go, Ed. We need to scare the bejesus out of you.
Yeah, I think just hip replacement's going to happen instead.
That's probably a safer version. It's better for everything.
The next day, we had breakfasted and we're smoking our morning pipe. Don't you love smoking your morning pipe? I love it. So I have every day, pipe and coffee, man. So they have it after breakfast. I'm not gonna have breakfast. That takes too much time to prepare. I don't have Mrs. Hudson preparing my breakfast. I just have the pipe and the coffee. And Lestrade shows up. And I love this little comedy at the end of this story. We've had this, this has been kind of, grim and no fun. And then Lestrade shows up, and he's, it's funny because, he's like, oh, we this guy was murdered in Milverton, and we've had our eyes on him for some time. And now we've got to capture them. We have their footmarks, we have their descriptions. It's 10-1 that we trace them. Well, you just did. Little did Lestrade know he did.
We don't talk about that, Ed. We don't talk about that.
The first fellow was a bit too active, but the second was caught by the under gardener and only got away after a struggle. Middle-sized, strongly built man, square jaw, thick neck, mustache, a mask over his eyes. Why, it might be a description of Watson, Holmes says. It's
the funniest line in the canon.
That's really good. I really like this, put on the end of the story here. Not needed. You could go right from where that ended to what's going to come next when Holmes and he runs out to the street in that little coda. This is, but it's really nice that Doyle has put this in here, I think.
And it's the first description of Watson. in all of the canon, because I don't think, Watson ever describes himself other than Holmes says you have a mustache or something happened to your mustache.
I never thought of that. That's
Brilliant.
interesting.
That is.
Yep.
I mean, Rich, let me put it this way. It's like, I know my canon, but I know that you know your canon better than I do. So I'm willing to accept that this is like the first description of Watson. Wow.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that because Watson doesn't. He doesn't talk about himself. So we know less about Watson than we know about Holmes because Watson's writing the reminiscences, his
Yeah.
reminiscences, but it's always about Holmes, not himself as much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I hadn't considered that. Go Rich.
And then Holmes gives this final defense here in a sense that Lestrade doesn't really understand, that a bit of irony in here, but that I considered Milverton one of the most dangerous men in London, and there are certain crimes which the law cannot touch, and which therefore to some extent justify private revenge. My sympathies are with the criminals rather than with the victim being Milverton in this case. I will not handle this case. That's probably the first time Holmes ever turned down a case because of, those reasons, or at least that we have ever seen. He doesn't want to solve a case that's stupid, that's like not interesting.
Yeah, well, he doesn't want to solve a case. I mean, aside from the fact that, he's the solution to the case.
Yeah.
But wouldn't want to solve a case that brings to justice somebody who basically killed someone who needed killing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he doesn't want to go there and be recognized potentially by the gardener or Agatha.
Agatha be like,
it's either as the burglar or as Escott, which we didn't even touch base on the idea that Escott is actually the whole reason why William S. Baring Gould thought what Holmes's name was William Sherlock Scott, or William Scott Sherlock Holmes, something like that.
I don't know this. Yeah.
Oh God. The whole Scott as in middle name, William
Sherlock Scott. Yeah.
Holmes.
That's great. I like that.
I mean, that's part of the whole like Baring Gould, like this is Sherlock Holmes's full name thing. So this is very much kind of deep in the we'll just say kind of like apocrypha, if you will. But
Madeline in the chat says she thinks Lestrade knows, and that's why he's saying like what's really going on is Lestrade knows that it's the two of them. What do you guys think?
But one could make the argument. I mean, I think Lestrade may know, but or may suspect, but there's a difference between what you can think and what you can prove.
Yep. And the constable out there, watching Milverton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that because it's true, said the inspector, with much amusement, it might be a description of Watson, like that he only thinks it's funny here. And when has Lestrade ever figured anything out that was obvious? Like, he doesn't. It would be shocking for him to figure this out. Yeah. He just doesn't know. Because he wouldn't go for this because it wouldn't fit the usual way of like, it's got to be a criminal, and Holmes isn't a criminal, so it couldn't be Holmes. Like, he would ignore Holmes and Watson because he would presume that they wouldn't do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Holmes, he leaves. Holmes said not one word about the tragedy all morning, and then suddenly he sees he's trying to think of something. By Jove, Watson, I've got it. Take your hat, come with me. And they run around to Regent Circus, Oxford Street to Regent Circus, and they look in a shop filled with photographs of the celebrities and beauties of the day. And there's a photo there, probably a carte de visite, a picture of a regal and stately lady in court dress with a high diamond tiara on her noble head. Door Steele gives us a glimpse of what this might look like. This is the initial letter for the beginning of the story. And there it is. This is, This would be what they saw in the window here. He's got the tiara, and uh, I caught my breath as I read the time-honored title of the great nobleman and statesman whose wife she had been. My
And
eyes
then,
met those of Holmes. Oh, actually, they say it. He describes it: the curved nose, the eyebrows, the straight mouth, like it's her
yeah.
they saw.
And that's what I'm getting at is that had been, this is as in past tense, indicating long period of time. Yeah, this is not something that is recent. Otherwise, I mean, it just seems like if it was recent, Holmes would have made the connection way quicker.
Yeah, I mean, he still remembered. Um,
You don't
uh,
always forget a potential we'll just say scandal.
he didn't know where he saw her from, and now he's just remembered like that's where I saw her picture, you know.
Yeah,
So
that's why I'm thinking it's past
they
versus
but it's also well, my eyes met those of Holmes, and he put his finger to his lips as we turned from the window, like we're not going to,
What a great ending. What a great ending.
talk about this.
Nothing more needs to be said.
Um,
it's
it's a great coda to the story. Is it other in this who this is it? Is it in this book? I think it's uh is it Philip Burgum? Yeah, it is. It is Philip Burgum,
oh,
uh,
Phil's awesome.
who also had that bit about the tennis shoes. He also has identified this place that it could be that what Doyle was thinking of putting this together. That it's a place called Barrows, Barraud, Barrows, which was at 263 Oxford Street. Herbert Rose Barrow was a portrait photographer, and he had a shop window which featured portraits he had taken of famous people. There could be aristocrats, could be actors. If you go to, and I have done this, and I will share this page here. This is the National Portrait Gallery page under Burroughs Limited. And these were the portraits, he would take. And some of them are actors in costume dress here. Dignified. No, like ladies and I was like, oh, I want to find like a society lady in a tiara, but no, I didn't find that. There are a couple of women here who are actors and their costumes. Where's another one down here? There we go. But these are the kind of things and then he would display these in his window there that people could see these pictures of famous people, actors, or statesmen.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
Phil is one heck of a researcher. I've got mad amounts of respect for Phil.
Yeah. So this is something that Doyle would have been aware of, that there is a place like this, that this isn't unusual, that he would have remembered, like, oh, and that's where I saw her picture, especially if she's somebody in society. The photographers did this, and this was their way of promoting the business by doing this. This is a story about private revenge, then, right? I mean, that's how he puts it with Lestrade at the end. How do we feel about that as a Sherlock Holmes story? How does that fit in with Sherlock Holmes? Private revenge.
Well, I mean, it's for me as someone who wrote an essay, actually appreciating the blue carbuncle as kind of mercy, or sorry, justice tempered with mercy. That the kind of playing with the idea that Holmes was comfortable, dealing with kind of taking into the law or taking the law into his own hands, and exacting justice that the criminal justice system in England would not necessarily have, doled out. I'm actually kind of okay with it. I mean, it's morally gray. It's definitely ethically questionable, but you know, I feel comfortable with Holmes being a little bit more of a judge and a jury. Maybe not necessarily executioner, but he didn't execute Milverton, so I feel okay with it. Rich?
Christopher Clausen said Holmes let the criminal escape either one, because the victim presented a greater threat to society than the criminal, or two, because the crime was a pardonable act of revenge for acts that the law is helpless to redress.
Mhm. And that's what happens here then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he has interfered in other cases with the law, in that, like, I think back even in a very early story, Blackjack Ballarat,
Yeah.
the story. Um,
Brain. Oh, Jesus.
right,
Blackjack and Parliament. Yes, it's Alice Turner. Jesus, this is what happens
yeah,
when
when he discovers, that this guy has, murdered the Boscombe Valley, the Boscombe
Bosco
Guy
Valley.
mystery.
I
At the end
should
of that
know him.
story, he's going to die, and I'll let him go. But the fact that he has all this money that he stole that is going to get passed down to his kids. Like, Holmes doesn't interfere with this. He lets this go because it would hurt the people, the children, to find out that this man was. So it's like it affects them, and he just figures, well, the money doesn't matter by this point anyway, that he's stolen from Australia. Um, that it doesn't, you don't want to hurt him now, but Holmes is very concerned with the reputations and honor of people throughout the stories. And that becomes sometimes a more of a concern than actual legal justice. In this case, it's like, it's completely the only concern is that the reputations of people is more important than any kind of legal justice, especially because you can just kill the guy. Now Holmes doesn't, but private revenge is important. Rich?
It was like with all of the stuff that Milverton had done, it's interesting that no one else had tried to kill him before.
Oh, I'm sure people probably tried to kill him, but maybe not necessarily in this way.
Yeah. They didn't just go to his house and shoot him. you know?
I mean, there is something exceedingly bold about like infiltrating one's house and like a fortress. It's a suicide mission for most people. I feel like this is oh, what's the what's the Star Wars film that happens between A New Hope and episode
What, Empire?
no, it's not Empire. It's the newer one. Uh,
Uh,
yeah, that basically the prequel or that Andor is the prequel to.
oh, with Rogue One happens
Yeah,
before.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Rogue One. Basically, this feels in many ways like Rogue One, where we know it's a suicide mission. Who wants to go on a suicide mission?
If you could afford to pay £7,000 back in 1899 to
Hmm.
prevent information coming out, you could then pay somebody £100 or £200 to go there and kill them, to go on that suicide mission.
Yeah. We're not telling people that murder's easy. It just costs a couple dollars, but
But if you're paying someone, then we'll just say is that there's always the potential for blackmail for that. In order for you to be clean, you have to do it yourself, but that's also a potential suicide mission.
and there is a law broken at the end of this. Very much, right, Rich? That
Yeah, clearly it's a premeditated murder. She planned it, she had the gun, she set up the appointment. So all of those stages of the planning shows that there's malice aforethought. She's intending to kill him. The thing that would help her to reduce it would be, hot blood or passion. So she's
yeah.
acting as a result of that. The longer period of time reduces that passion and makes it more murder. But I think if I was defending her to a jury, I'd be arguing that the loss of her husband caused her to do this, and ultimately he needed killing. So I
Yeah.
would like throw myself on the mercy of the jury and say, yes, she did it. We don't dispute that she did it, but he deserved it. And so we rest our case in your hands. She doesn't deserve to go to the gallows
Yeah.
for all of the things that this guy has done. And to try to, the difficulty in a way would be to get witnesses to testify that he had done stuff to them,
Yeah.
blackmailed them. All of the
Yeah, well,
papers
that's
are
also
gone.
putting themselves, and their scandals out for public consumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who
Which is
wants to
why
be,
he's able to be so dominant and foil even Holmes. It's like nobody can go against him.
who wants to basically air their dirty laundry?
Right.
Is Holmes breaking the law at the end here by not revealing?
No. They had two different laws that were applicable. Let me just find my notes here. Yeah.
Because I guess the question is like, is he covering up for somebody when he knows some information? And he's been directly asked by the police in the
Okay,
sense.
so
Oh.
some people have suggested that Holmes and Watson were guilty for failing to inform the police that they knew who killed Milverton. English common law used to have an offense, misprision of a felony, which was a misdemeanor. Nobody ever got convicted of that. Judge Al Rosenblatt, was a BSI, said that there was no conviction in England for misprision of a felony from 1557 to 1938, and the law went to be abolished. And so I always used to argue, if you're a rape victim and you don't report that you were raped because you're embarrassed and you don't want anybody to know, that's a crime. And that's what misprision of a felony, that you don't report it. The other thing is obstruction of justice or perverting the course of justice, which is a felony, was another possible crime. But for that to be a crime for Holmes, he has to perform a conscious, positive act, made threats to harm or intimidate a witness to prevent the witness from giving evidence to the police, or absent evidence of his demanding payment from that woman to remain silent, it's not an obstruction of
Yeah.
justice.
He doesn't do anything to cover up the scene that, anything. I mean, he destroys the letters, but that doesn't have to do with nothing to do with
And that's an argument against my position, in that, but for his destroying those letters, the police may have been able to find out who the killer was.
Valid.
All righty. Well, certainly, I still think this is the most unusual Holmes story up to this point. I think that, the definition of you described what Holmes does in his stories to anyone, it would not match this story. Except that someone except that some justice is achieved by Holmes, but it's really the only justice he gets to achieve is because he gets to burn the letters after someone else has killed him. That's it.
Yep.
And so, who was the killer?
And that's my final question.
A lot of people have written things about who was the killer. Dr. Richard Asher asked, was it possible that the papers in the safe included some very sprightly letters from Holmes himself? Bruce Harris wrote an article that perhaps there was evidence of a homosexual affair between Holmes and Milverton. Irving Fenton said, it's a stretching coincidence, a bit too far to imagine that Holmes and Watson were in Appledore Towers on the exact night that a tall, slim, dark woman chose to kill Milverton. It's interesting that none of the servants, not even a constable, saw the woman leave the premises. And this is what I have the biggest problem with about this woman, right? This regal lady. How did she get to Appledore Towers on this cold, wintry night? Did she take a hansom cab that people would have seen? Did she ride a bike? Did she ride a horse? Did she walk 2 miles to get there in this winter in that outfit that's described by Sidney Paget with the mask? It doesn't make sense. Nothing in the story makes sense about some other woman. And what's curious is if you read the canon and you talk about guns and Holmes and Watson, did they ever use guns? Did they ever take guns to protect themselves in the story? Yes. In Hound of the Baskervilles, in a lot of the stories, Holmes says to Watson, "Do you have your revolver? Well, take it because we're dealing with a dangerous man." Holmes, take your revolver, take your pistol. When Milverton comes to 221B, he pulls open his coat and he shows the gun. So he knows that this is a dangerous man. Read Charles Augustus Milverton and see if Watson ever mentions anything about taking a gun. Isn't that kind of curious? He's not afraid to say it in all of the other cases, but in this case, they never mentioned that they took a gun. How did this woman get there? And where does she go after she shoots Milverton? The door opens, they hear the breeze, and she goes out the same door that Holmes and Watson go out. So this woman, dressed as she is, does she hop that 6-foot wall? There's
I mean,
no
I
way.
could.
There's no way. There is no other woman. There is no other woman. It's Holmes and Watson. They go there to steal the papers, and they are discovered by Milverton. Now, what happens if Milverton calls Scotland Yard? Holmes and Watson are convicted of burglary, facing life in prison. Holmes has already said, "We're going to fight this to the end. We're going to fight this to the end." And so they're either going to go to prison, and as foretold by Watson, they're going to be in prison together, sharing a cell, or they have to shoot him. And he deserves killing. He deserves killing. And who knows what those other letters say, if there's other things about Holmes that Milverton has accumulated, because you see the venom that no other criminal is thought of the same way as Milverton is. And so Holmes has a motive to kill him, and so Holmes kills him.
So does that make this story a cover story for
So
why
what
they
happens?
won't be accused?
That's what I think happened. That Holmes discovers that Lestrade is investigating, and this case is an open case.
Cold case.
It's a cold case, and so he discovers that something's going to come out. Then they may get some evidence. Maybe Agatha has seen Holmes and putting things together. Maybe the undergardener, maybe somebody, some other witness. Maybe Eva knows that he had a motive to go there, and she's happily married now. Well, maybe something's happened to Lady Eva, and so why not put out this story now and let the people know who potentially are going to sit on a jury if they ever charge Holmes, and let them say, let Holmes say, no, it wasn't me, it was another woman, and you can't prosecute me for misprision of a felony because I have no duty to report that.
And why would we publish this story if this wasn't the truth?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Even though I did some things that are questionable under the law, why would we say that if, why would we be willing to put that out there if we were the actual ones? So,
Because hiding in plain sight is actually a very valid, very, very valid way of handling things.
How'd that lady get back home?
she disappeared into the night.
She had a cab waiting.
Describe the weather as horrible weather. It's the wind is blowing, it's cold, and look at how she's dressed.
It really would have been a very interesting thing if Doyle had put something in this story that was like that would give some kind of explanation that maybe she wasn't real, Like I would like that she was some kind of ghost coming back for revenge. Of course, they don't use guns, but
Some people say it was an inside job, that it was Agatha or someone else or the lady was kept in the house and hidden. Okay, the police go there now. Do you think that the police, after a shooting, are going to look everywhere in the house?
One would hope, but this is the Victorian constabulary.
Yeah, but I have to argue that they would have searched every room, looked in every closet, looking for the potential killer, that they may be an inside job. And so it makes no sense that it was this woman.
This is
Yep.
a story that really does beg a lot of, this kind of Sherlockian, Inquisition that like, because there are things at the end that really don't tie up. And I think especially because the whole story is there's this clarion call to like, this is not the usual Sherlock Holmes story. So
I don't know who it was that said it, but some guy said, when you've eliminated all which is impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
is
And
that
the
Mr. Spock? Was
is,
that I think it was Mr.
Yeah, well,
Spock.
actually, no, he's an ancestor of Mr. Spock.
but the painful truth is that a woman didn't kill Charles Augustus Milverton, but he was killed by Holmes and Watson.
There you go.
We'll see how that goes.
Heard it here, people. All righty. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Sherlockians, for joining us for episode 38 of Sherlock Monthly. Monica, Rich, this was great. Thanks so much for doing this. Rich, I hope I can get you back here.
Sounds good.
Monica, you're always welcome back here.
Oh, I was just going to say nothing but love. I'm just sad I'm missing you in Philly in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, we'll get you back here.
In the autumn, definitely.
And we'll get you back for the show. We'll
definitely. All right. Much love, Ed. Thank you for having me.
Everyone, coming up next month, we will return to talk about the adventure of the 6 Napoleons. And our friends from the Doings with Doyle podcast, Mark Jones and Paul Chapman, will join me for that one. Thank you to the sponsor of Sherlock Monthly, Lisa Washington. We couldn't do these shows without the generous support of our patrons. You can support the Rosenbach through donation. Your support helps us create more programs like this and also care for our collections, like the Arthur Conan Doyle books and manuscripts that we have. You could also become a member. Membership gives you early access and discounts to programs and courses. You can find out more at our website, rosenbach.org. Again, let me remind everyone to subscribe to this channel, to like these videos. I hope you do. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library, where the game is always a book. Thanks so much, guys. Find my video file to share. There it is. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.